That is the $10 million mistake. Not in salary, in lost time, lost momentum, lost optionality. Here's a question that's cost companies more money than almost any hiring mistake. What does success look like for the executive you're about to hire? And most CEOs can't answer it. Here's what happens when I ask that question. Silence, or vague answers about building the team or scaling the function. And that silence, that vagueness, is the most expensive mistake most growth stage companies make. Not the wrong hire, not the bad interview, not the toxic executive. The mistake is this: hiring without defining success. And it costs companies millions of dollars. Let me ask you to consider something uncomfortable. What if the reason so many executive hires fail isn't that you hired the wrong person? What if you never defined what the right person would actually do? Because here's what I've noticed over more than 20 years. Companies spend months debating who to hire and almost no time defining what success looks like. And then they're surprised when the hire doesn't work out. Let me tell you about a founder I worked with. Series B company, 40 million in revenue, strong product, real traction. They needed a chief revenue officer. The founder had been acting head of sales. He needed to hand it off. He had been running his own search and had narrowed it down to a couple finalists. He called me for advice before making the final decision. And I asked him one question. What does success look like 12 months from now if this hire works? The founder said, they'll have built a world-class sales team. I said, okay, what does that mean specifically? What do you mean? I said, how many reps? What quota per rep? What's the close rate? What's the average deal size? What percentage of pipeline comes from outbound versus inbound? And most importantly, what revenue number does the team need to deliver 12 months from now to make this hire a success? I don't know. I haven't thought about it that specifically. And there it was, the $10 million mistake. He was about to make an offer to a candidate without defining what that candidate was supposed to achieve. That happens every day in companies all across America. Smart founders, strong candidates, and nobody asks the most important question. We spent the next week defining those outcomes. And when we did, we realized neither of his finalists was actually the right fit. We ended up finding someone different, someone who had built exactly the type of sales infrastructure he actually needed, not the one he thought he needed. And here's what would have happened if he'd made that hire without doing this work. No way to evaluate whether the candidate was the right fit. No way to onboard effectively. No way to measure progress. No way to know if the hire was working until it was too late. Think about that. He was about to make a $250,000 decision, and he had no way to measure if it was working. And it's happening right now in growth stage companies everywhere. Let me show you exactly what I mean. Two candidates for VP of engineering both look strong, but watch what happens when you apply the outcomes lens. Candidate A, VP of engineering at a 200-person company, managed 80 engineers, ran a mature development process. Candidate B, director of engineering at a 50-person company, managed 20 engineers, scaled infrastructure from 10,000 users to 1 million, rebuilt the architecture twice. If you're hiring for a role, candidate A looks stronger, bigger title, bigger team. But if you're hiring for outcomes, the answer depends entirely on what you need accomplished. If your outcome is to scale your infrastructure to handle 10x growth, then candidate B might be perfect. But if your outcome is professionalize our engineering organization and reduce technical debt, then maybe candidate A is better. Different outcomes, different candidates, but most companies never get that specific. They just say, We need a VP of engineering. And then they wonder why the person they hire isn't doing what they expected. How can you evaluate whether someone is the right fit if you haven't defined what success actually looks like? You can't. You're just guessing. And expensive guessing cost companies momentum. In that CRO search, I told the founder, before we go any further, you need to answer these questions. What revenue number does the sales team need to deliver 12 months from now? What decisions should this person be making without needing approval? And what does too slow look like? What does too fast look like? The founder spent a week working through those questions, and something interesting happened. The answers changed who the right candidate was. Initially, they thought they needed someone who had scaled sales teams at much larger companies. And then they defined the outcomes specifically. They realized they needed someone who had built sales infrastructure from earlier stages, not someone who had managed scale, someone who had created the foundations that allowed scale to happen. Different outcome, different candidate, and they never would have known without doing that work up front. The companies that get executive hiring right don't start with candidates. They start with outcomes. And here's what they ask. What does this role need to accomplish in the next 12 months? What decisions will this person make that I can't make or don't have time for? What changes in the company if this hire works? And here's the uncomfortable part. Those questions reveal whether you need the role at all. I've worked with founders who went through this exercise and realized, actually, we don't need a VP of product yet. We need the founder to focus on product for 6 months. Then we'll need the VP. Defining outcomes doesn't just clarify who to hire, it clarifies whether to hire. And that clarity saves companies enormous amounts of money. Let me give you the exact framework I use with every founder. 5 questions. If you can answer these, you're ready to hire. If you can't, you're not. First, what does success look like 12 months from now? Not vague success, specific success, numbers, structures, changes. Second, what decisions will this person make that I'm currently making or that aren't being made? This is critical. If you can't list 5 to 10 decisions that will shift to this person, you probably don't need the role yet. Third, what does this person need to accomplish in their first 90 days to be on track? This is your early warning system. Fourth, what constraints or freedoms does this person operate within? Budget, headcount, authority to change process? Fifth, what does this person need from me to be successful? Time, context, air cover? If you're not prepared to provide it, don't make the hire. Now, here's what happens when you do this work. Your job descriptions get shorter and sharper. Your interviews get more focused. Your onboarding gets faster. Because you're not debating whether someone is good. You're evaluating whether they're delivering the outcomes you defined. Let me give you one more example. I worked with the founder hiring a VP of marketing. Before we started, I asked, what does success look like? The founder said, more leads. I asked, how many more leads? From what channels? At what cost per lead? The founder realized they didn't actually need more leads. They needed better conversion on the leads they already had, which meant they didn't need a demand generation expert. They needed someone who understood funnel optimization. Completely different profile, completely different search. So, before your next executive hire, do this. Stop. Don't write the job description yet. Don't start interviewing yet. First, define success. Write down, what does this person need to accomplish in 12 months? What decisions will they make? What will be different if they succeed? Get specific. Use numbers. Make it concrete. And then, only then, start thinking about candidates. Because here's what I've learned. The companies that do this work up front make faster decisions, they onboard more effectively, and they course correct earlier. That clarity, that specificity is worth millions of dollars, not because it guarantees success, but because it makes success measurable. And measurable success is the only kind that compounds. So, I'll ask you the same question I ask every founder. If you're hiring an executive right now, what does success look like 12 months from now? If you can't answer that question in 2 minutes with specific outcomes, you're not ready to hire. And if you hire anyway, you're making the $10 million mistake. Not in salary, in time you'll never get back. Because time at growth stage is the only resource that truly matters. And hiring without defining success is the fastest way to waste it.